Good morning. It's a pleasure to see everybody here today. We have an event, a news conference here today to release this survey from the Center for Innovation and Public Value. And I'm going to have Jason Saul, who's the co-founder of Mission Measurement, kick it off. We're excited here today. This is a bipartisan effort. I'm very thrilled to have my colleague, Senator Pam Althoff, here with me, who's been a leader on budget issues and spending reform and making sure we work towards fixing what's has been wrong in our state. We have Sharma, who's joined with us today, who's also the co-founder for the Center for Innovation and Public Value. But I would first want to introduce Jason, who's going to take us through the survey. Jason Saul is a nationally recognized expert in measuring social impact. He's on the faculty at Northwestern's Kellogg School. He's the founder and CEO of Mission Measurement and the co-founder of the Center for Innovation and Public Value. He's also a member of the Budgeting for Results Commission, a nonpartisan commission appointed by Governor Quinn, on which Senator Althoff and I also serve. Without further ado, Jason Saul.
Thanks, Senator. The Center for Innovation and Public Value is a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization. Simply put, our mission is to measure and improve the value of government. We believe that we can actually get twice the results for half the cost. But to do that, we need to fundamentally change the way we think about government and about budgeting. Today, government is stuck in a binary trade-off, either raising taxes or cutting vital programs. Neither is acceptable. We need a third way. The third way is that we need to get a better bang for our buck. We need to make smarter decisions and invest in programs that produce outcomes that people want. The budget should not be about funding programs. It should be about purchasing outcomes. And today, we're here to announce the results of an inaugural public value monitor that measures the outcomes that people want from government. I'm going to turn it over to my co-founder, Sharma.
Thanks, Jason. So as we launched this survey, one of the questions we asked ourselves was that we need a new level of accountability to taxpayers. Right now, the way we hold government accountable is in two ways. One is by meting out or identifying waste, fraud, and abuse. The other is by measuring trust in government. Neither one of those ways really allows us to hold government accountable. So what we're proposing is we need to ask people what they really value from and want from government, more specifically than just trusting government, and also how they want their money spent. So that's where we launched the Public Value Monitor. This is our inaugural survey in Illinois, and our plan is to roll this out throughout the country. But in Illinois, we surveyed over 1,000 citizens, and we asked three primary questions. First, what outcomes do people value most? Second, what value or bang for the buck are citizens currently getting? And third, how do taxpayers want their dollars spent? Here's what we found. I'll provide a high-level summary. One is, overall, Democrats and Republicans surprisingly agree on the same outcomes. They want the same outcomes from government, and in large part agree on where taxpayer dollars should be spent. More specifically, as we can see on the chart on the left, Republicans and Democrats again agree on 4 of the top high-value outcomes: increasing employment, improving school quality and performance, creating new jobs, and reducing crime. There is some difference in terms of healthcare and attracting new businesses, but what we found is, for the most part, Democrats and Republicans agree. The other thing we asked was about bang for the buck, and not surprisingly, only 20% say they're really getting their money's worth from government. So 80%, that means, are not getting bang for the buck. And then third, we asked Republicans and Democrats again how they want their tax dollars allocated, and what we found is, again, they mostly agree. As we can see on the chart on the right, that both parties want to spend more money on attracting and growing business, ensuring public safety, and improving infrastructure. At the same time, our survey found that both parties want to spend less on education and basic government support services. With that, I'll hand it over to Senator Kotowski and Althoff to share their perspectives.
Good afternoon. Let me begin by saying it is truly an honor to be part of this collaboration with these fine, very distinguished gentlemen and the individuals who are associated with the center that are here with us today. It occurred to me that politicians, that we elected representatives, use the words transparency and accountability with pretty routine regularity in our political vernacular. And I believe that the public value methodology used in conjunction with our budgeting for results process actually gives substance and credibility to those two words. I think that taxpayers today particularly expect, well, maybe they demand accountability. They demand that their elected representatives prove to them that there is a value in a way that we spend their very hard-earned money. I think that these two methodologies and processes provide that accountability, that transparency that we talk about all the time, and will give us in result that end comment and accountability to show individuals that we are spending their dollars appropriately.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Senator Althoff, and thank you for your leadership on this issue. It's been a pleasure. As you can imagine, in Springfield, sometimes there's a challenge getting both parties to work together, and some party has one interest in one particular area, and the other party is. And with Senator Althoff and I have taken pride in working together to rise above that, to make sure that we achieve results for the people that we represent across the state. And this is why this is so important. I mean, what the Center for Innovation and Public Value is doing here today is presenting us with a roadmap for what the public is saying. The public is telling us, here are the outcomes that we want you to invest our tax dollars in. And they're saying here's how much money we want you to allocate towards those particular outcomes. And then what's our job as public servants is to measure the impact of those programs which are geared towards those outcomes. So what are the programs that we have in place to make sure we attract and retain quality businesses? What are the programs that we have that we're measuring to make sure that we increase academic performance in school readiness? And how do we make sure that that happens? This is so crucial. This new way forward, what we're talking about today, is something we've been working on for a few years in our state. And it's the equivalent of turning around, as I often say, an ocean liner in the middle of the Chicago River, because they've always done budgeting a certain way in the state of Illinois. But now we have a framework in place for increasing public engagement, for hearing what they have to say, the same way a family sits around a kitchen table and says, well, here are our spending priorities, here are our outcomes, here's how we're going to spend money this year, given our limited resources, and here's how we want to get the best return, the best bang for our dollar. This is what we are charged with in a bipartisan way, to rise above these petty differences that have occurred, to make sure that we achieve the most for what the public is looking for. This is the new way forward. This is the opportunity to achieve what the public is clamoring for us to achieve. They don't want to see us hold up things just because someone has a slight difference of opinion or even a major one. They said, what are you doing to make sure you're looking out for the best needs of the people that you represent and the people across the state of Illinois? And this is going to get us there. So we've made significant progress, but this is furthermore a launching pad to hear more from the public. Over the past couple of years, we've ramped up public engagement. We went from 2 public hearings to 6 public hearings across the state of Illinois. Now, this is a survey that, thankfully, to the Center for Innovation and Public Value, to Jason Saul and Rod Sharma, we are hearing from people more so where they want their dollars spent, how they want them spent. And we need to use budgeting for results as a vehicle to best measure, to best have that level of accountability so there's a higher standard of how we're spending our tax dollars. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Kotowski, and thank you, Senator Althoff. We're honored to have this opportunity today. I think the leadership you see by the state is unique among states and even in the nation about taking a new way forward. This is not simply arguing over programs. This is agreeing on outcomes. And while many states are focusing on all kinds of performance metrics for one program or another, this state is starting to unify around outcomes and align programs to produce those outcomes, and I truly think this will be a vanguard for all other states to follow. I want to thank the senators for their leadership today, and do we entertain questions? Absolutely. Entertain any questions you all might have.
Senator Althoff, the legislative leaders, especially the Democrats, are getting the outcomes they want with the special interests. How do you get them to measure the interests of what the people want?
Well, you know, that is always the challenge. The challenge is that we can have the tools, but the challenge is in making people use those tools to get the outcomes we want. But I would tell you that as a General Assembly member, my job is to ensure that those tools are ready and that they're sharpened and they're available when those leaders choose to use them, and to encourage that to happen.
Dan, you want to answer this one? Sure. How do we get the actual leaders to not measure the interests of the special interests so much, but of the people? I mean, how do you get them to do that? They're getting the outcomes they want.
Well, this is one very important way. I mean, this is building on an effort that we've engaged in. As you can imagine, engaging the public on spending the budget and getting people to truly understand the budget is a challenge, because for years people spent money a certain way in the state of Illinois, which didn't necessarily engage the public in the most productive way possible. So this is one of these ways in which we can highlight what the public is saying. You know, this is a survey that's all across the state of Illinois, the Republicans and Democrats. This is a great way of doing this. Continue to engage the public through these public hearings is another way. Senator Althoff and I are going to continue to work together to make sure we reach out to the public to get more feedback. This is going to be more of a ground-up effort. Now, we've made sure to focus in the state, especially in the budget process, to find out from agencies and programs what outcomes they're working towards, how do they measure their impact, their effectiveness, and what's the cost per outcome. But this is a complete transformation in the way in which budgets have been looked at. And this is a great way to hear feedback from the taxpayers and continue to build on that. I'm going to use this in particular as a tool to reach out to my constituents and say, here's what people are saying across the state of Illinois. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Right? And Senator Althoff and I are going to work together to make sure we do outreach to different interest groups to make sure their feedback is heard, especially if it's not being heard right now in the state budget.
But how long do you think it's going to take before the leadership of either party or both parties will actually pay attention to this versus what can get each group through its own primaries, which sometimes pulls you in opposite directions?
You want to answer that first?
Sure. I think this process we're trying to put into place is to take the politics out of decisions that we make, so that we're not worried about that during a primary season. How long it'll take, it's like I tell my kids all the time. I still get in my car and I put the key in the ignition and turn the car on. They don't. They get in the car and they put their seatbelt on. That's what they've been taught. Took several years, but it still is now their typical approach to a problem. We're hoping through education that we can engage the next generation, the next group of legislators who come in the next election, that this is the answer to all the politics, to how decisions are made, that this is an honest to goodness measurement that tells them what their constituency, what our constituency wants from government.
Thank you, Senator Althoff. And this is another way in which this happens, when you have Republicans and Democrats working together, and without concern for whether or not we're running for re-election. This is a concern for how do we fix what's going on in the state, and by engaging people from both political parties in an effort which fundamentally changes the way tax dollars are spent. And so the other thing I would say that is really important is to understand that right now there's 9 outcome areas in the state of Illinois. And 450 programs in the state have been folded underneath those outcome areas. That's significant. There's close to $1 billion now in the state budget that hadn't been reviewed and scrutinized. As a result of this effort, it is now taking place. In addition to that, the state of Illinois, for the first time ever, has a 3-year multi-year revenue and expense forecast, which never before existed, which had an impact on how we were able to reform Medicaid to make sure we reduce costs related to that. So there have been significant changes. In fact, last year in the state budget, we got rid of 16 unfunded mandates in 6 agencies that had existed for a long time. So change that's taking place is occurring. It's happening every day. But like I said, it's going to take some time. The good news is there's a plan in place for this to make happen. And the good news is this is a bipartisan effort. And I think you're going to see even more support as we progress in the future.
I want to make one last comment and then a question. To support the senators and to answer your question, it's really difficult to have accountability if you don't know what the expectations are. So accountable to what? Unless we understand what outcomes the public actually wants, we're just randomly guessing at accountability. There is no way to be accountable. So the first step in accountability is setting expectations. I think we have that step forward. The second step to accountability is actually delivering on those expectations. And that's really where legislation and initiative like budgeting for results comes in. Budgeting for results will be able to look at the cost per outcome of every program in the state and figure out what outcomes are those 450 programs producing and at what cost and where are we getting the value. That's the answer to your question of how do we actually get people to deliver on it. Next question.
This question is to you. You can talk about Democrats and Republicans wanting the same outcomes, but how do you take into account when they have very different beliefs on how to get to that outcome?
That's a great question, right? And so you remember back when President Obama gave one of his acceptance speeches, he said something like, some may be pro-choice, others may be pro-life, but we all agree on reducing the outcome of unwanted teen pregnancies, right? So you start with the outcome, and then you figure out where do we agree on the strategy. So there may be some things that are just ethically at an extreme where we factor those out. There may be other things that are just way too expensive. But now that we're both locked in on the site for the outcome, we have a framework for agreeing on the best, most effective strategy for getting there that has a general zone of agreement or a meeting of the minds on what type of shared acceptance of a strategy we can use to get there. So you're going to have extremes on strategy, but at least we have a framework now to come to agreement on effectively delivering those outcomes. And I leave it to the political process to battle that out. But we have the first step, which is to understand the expectations and the results that we want.
But isn't that a bit naive to assume that those extremes aren't going to come into play, that they're just going to go away when you dismiss them?
Well, I don't think that they're going to go away, but I think you have a framework for working them out now. Otherwise, you're simply arguing over, no, this program, no, fund this, cut that, fund this, cut that. Now we can say, actually, we both agree on the outcome. What's the most effective way to produce that outcome that we can both agree on? So at least we have a framework for having a more constructive dialogue and discussion versus trying to kill your program or running to get funding for mine. So I believe that framework is the first starting point, and I leave it to these folks who are better at navigating the political process to answer the rest of the question of how do we actually reconcile strategies.
So how would your scheme solve the pension crisis? Each side apparently agrees we ought to end the liability, so apply your discipline to that. How would that solve the crisis?
Well, if you look at where is the area in the state budget, it says right there under 31%, no, that's healthcare, 25% addressing basic support functions of government, right? People were asked to act like a budget director. And in that figure are the pension costs. In that figure are the group health care insurance or debt service. And what people are saying, it's like, okay, you're spending, we want to see spending geared towards other areas in the state, whether it be attracting new businesses, new opportunities. It speaks to the fact that we need to move forward in that direction to make sure we reform the pension crisis so that we can address what the public is saying. The public's saying that you're spending money in a certain area, and that's fine, but we have other priorities. And in fact, we want to see you spend it less. And I think that's an accurate reflection of where we need to go. And it's an accurate reflection of how important it is that we need to address that area within the budget. So I look at this and I say, and what people don't get is like in the state budget, we have these 9 outcome areas, right? And now when we look at the state budget, perfect example of this is early childhood education, which is a perfect example. All this research and all this information about the impact of early childhood education and the benefits to that and how that makes sure that students perform well in an academic environment and make sure that they're able to get jobs when they get older. And we have so much information within that area of the budget. So there's certain areas within the budget that are geared towards specific outcome that we have more information than others. This speaks to the fact that as we start to gather more information, we're able to make more informed decisions on behalf of the public. So this is a very informed decision. The public is saying, you're spending 23% right now. That's too high. We want to see you spend less. That means we have to move forward. We need to reform what you were talking about.
I was just going to add one thing in terms of what's really important about the survey and this whole process is the public engagement process, because we don't give enough credit to our citizens to really ask them what they want and then actually go back and communicate with them. And if you look at the survey results, what we see, which is typical what we're seeing nationally as well, is most people are in the middle of the road. You're definitely going to have those extremes. But if we can start educating people and communicating, and that's part of the mission of CIPV, is to do that, is to go back and share this information, share this knowledge with citizens on what they really value, and then what are the set of things that work. Not because government does them, because private sector does them. It doesn't matter. It's like, what are the set of things that work, and that's what's most important. And if we can start to trust people that way too, and we've done this in a number of settings, you can see that this works. It's really a matter of starting to communicate back and engaging the public.
This can go to either of the guys from the center. You talk about engaging the public, but you have, for instance, both Democrats and Republicans say they care about improving school quality performance, yet they both agree you need to spend less. Isn't that just wishful thinking on the public's part that they can accomplish that while spending less?
Well, I think it's an interesting question. What we asked was, what outcomes do you put the biggest priority on? But then, unlike any other survey, which simply asks, well, would you spend more on education? Would you spend more on healthcare? That's just an open-ended question. What we said is, okay, let's pretend you're the state budget director. You have $100 to allocate across the outcomes you said are most important. How would you allocate that money? And we asked them to allocate that $100. Then we said, okay, now here's how much the state's spending, and that's where we saw the gap. So I don't think that the public is under any illusions that we can solve all problems for this amount of money, but this is basically a matter of what they're saying. This is the bang for the buck we want. So this is how much of our tax dollars out of 100 we want to be able to spend $23 on improving outcomes for education. Figure out the best, most effective way to get there. I think what we will also see through the research in budgeting for results is that solving social problems is actually not a function of spending more money always. In often cases, what we find is that we are spraying a bunch of money all over the place, hoping that they add up to some outcomes, as opposed to purchasing outcomes from the best, most effective programs. There are many programs, and my organization, Mission Measurement, has measured them across the state, across the country, that are producing tremendous outcomes for very low cost. We need to focus on that. We need a new barometer for measuring programs, not just by shellacking people with a bunch of performance metrics that count outputs, but by truly showing their contribution to the outcome. And the budgeting for results process will pave the way for us to do that. And so ultimately, we will be able to answer the public's call to say, we want to spend less, and frankly, we want twice the results. We want to figure out how do we help twice as many people for half the cost. And I guarantee you, if you go through the budget and look at all the different programs that are aiming at that outcome, you'll find some programs that are producing much higher results for lower cost, and you'll find other programs that are producing less results for a lot of cost. We got to start being more tuned into ROI and bang for the buck, and I think that's how we get there.